Now, during the birth of Nestor, I knew he had to be dedicated before the Lord. And Catholic was the church that I used to worship. But now, with the rules and regulations of Catholic Church, which none I had fulfilled, it acted as a barrier for me to be able to do it in Catholic Church. So the only option I had was through Pastor Alex and Priscilla. So I managed to talk to them, and I told them that I want Nestor to be dedicated to God, still an infant. So this happened. And when this happened, I managed to even change my firstborn daughter Lindsay card, because it used to read Divine Church. So I managed, through the help of Pastor Alex and Priscilla, and changed everything. So they now were of Emmanuel Jesus Power Ministry. And this was not the only thing that changed, because they told me now I have to be a member, and the children have to be coming in the church. And that is how finally I was no longer a member of Catholic Church, and now it began my new journey in a spiritual church, Emmanuel Jesus Power Ministry. From where I lived to Emmanuel Jesus Power Ministry, it was very far, in Malava interior. Because from where I lived to that church, mostly I used a motorbike, or sometimes it was when Lynette used to go to their church together with her family. Mostly she used tuk-tuk as a means of transport. So sometimes I will get that opportunity to use a tuk-tuk. Now, even before I joined Emmanuel Jesus Power Ministry Church, the times when Lindsay used to visit Lynette, because mostly Lynette used to go for the Keishas at Emmanuel Jesus Power Ministry Church, and she used to go with the whole family. So whenever Lindsay was there at her place, they all went to Emmanuel Jesus Power Ministry Church for these occasions. So that marked my beginning of going to the spiritual church. Now, at my workplace, Lillian Noan Batu Salon, she was a Catholic, and she used to say that even on Sundays, we were supposed to report to work. So when I was in Catholic Church, it was easy for me. I used to go for the first Mass and then report to work. But now when I joined the spiritual church, Emmanuel Jesus Power Ministry, who Lillian was familiar with, Pastor Alex and Priscilla, it meant that I wasn't able to report to work on Sundays, because the service always ended late, mostly around 2. So around 2, then you have to travel back home. It is another long journey. So it was just like a day off. So Lillian was never pleased with this thing. He used to say that it is a must we report to work. So it was kind of war for me, not just for me, for everyone who was her workmate. He demanded that we should go to church. We should report to work. So she was saying that she always reports to church at 5 a.m. in Mukumu, then reports to work. So it's like she was saying that we must also find a church that the service ends early so that we may be able to report to work. And another thing, Lillian was an alcohol addict. She used to drink much. She was a widow, having her children to raise. She said that her husband died when her last born was at a very young age. So this was a warfare. Sometimes we will come on Monday, now that on Sunday we have missed. He will speak all kinds of evil words. Sometimes even we were denied to work. Customers will come, but us who are not there, who are never available, we will never be granted that opportunity to dress someone's head. They will only be granted to those who are available. So it was like a warfare. And she used to speak all the bad, all the evil. Sometimes you may come job late. You have come late because of the ABCs you had to do at home. But in her mind, she will just sometimes start speaking and saying, you have spent all the night with your husband. You have been turned different positions. Now you are here coming at job late because you are tired because of what you did at night. So she used to speak bad and evil. Sometimes she was just good, but sometimes she used to speak very bad and evil, harsh words. So us, sometimes we were just left to look at her. This continued for a very long time. And now that Lynette had her business in that place, the sale of weaves and hair products, I saw the enmity growing. Because sometimes a customer will come, the customer wants to buy weave that needs to be plaited on her head. But the weave is there in the salon, because that was the agreement that Lillian had with Lynette. Lynette should be selling the weaves there instead of fetching them from the outside shops. So sometimes you'll find the weave is there in the salon, but she will just go and buy from the outside shop. So I used to note these things, but I just looked and kept quiet. So I had troubles at home. At the workplace, there was no peace. And Nick, after losing his job at the gas point, his own father again intervened, and he opened for Nick a gas selling business. So Nick started operating this business, the gas selling business, and it didn't last for long. Just another thing happened. One day he went to open his business, and he found that it had been broken into, and the gas cylinders were missing. So that again made him jobless. So I had that burden. Everything on me, everything on me, everything on me. So when Nick's dad saw all this again, he somehow intervened and said that he will be paying again Lindsay's school fees at Hill School. At first he provided some amount and he promised that he will pay the rest. And also, I used to pay my NHIF card. But when I was jobless, I failed to pay that NHIF card. But when Nick's dad saw that I was pregnant, because it reached a certain point and I just had to talk to him. I was able to open up and talk to him because we used to meet around that place, but we were like enemies. And many of us, the people around, knew that I was the wife to her son. So it reached a certain point I had to let go and I started talking to him. And when I started talking to him, seeing that I was pregnant, he asked me for my NHIF details. And he said that he will be paying the amount for me every month. So that at the time of birth, it will help me. And also I had registered for Linda Mama. So he started paying, but it reached a point, then he stopped. So that was the life that I had. It was a life of struggle. And another thing I noted that I used to be productive when I was alone, but the time Nick came into my life, slowly by slowly, everything started to stagnate again. And more so, one thing that I forgot is that the time when I was still at Nick's homestead, during that time of accident, when somehow I became broke, this is the time when I started reaching out for the loans, the Mshwari loans, the Tala loans. So I was just surrounded by issues that all were just looking unto me. So it was too much for me and it was becoming unbearable. But I chose not to say to anyone because I knew the answer that I will get is that I was separated from him and it was I myself who went back to him. So I had to carry my own burden, my own struggles, because I had sworn to myself, I handle everything by myself. And if it is time for me to go, if I have to go, I will just go by myself. I never wanted to involve any other person. So I now became a member of Emmanuel Jesus Power Ministry Church. So Nick proposed that we have to take Nesta to their homestead. Now remember, this is the same homestead that I had never visited since that day that I was separated from them through the police. So this is 2019. And the last time that I was there was in 2017, August. And the funny thing, and I guess it was just the will of God, the same day that Nesta was born, 2nd August 2019, this is the same day that I was strangled by Nick's mother 2 years ago. 2017, 2nd August 2017. It was the same day. And the day of my strangling, it happened in the morning hours. And it is the same morning hours that Nesta was born. So I was just asking and saying to myself, God, is it your will? Because this is strange. So I was secretly observing so many things with the inner eye, but nobody knew. And I was just overburdened. Like I was just having a heavy yoke that it was wearing me out. I used to walk as if I may drop dead the next time, but I was just giving myself hope and strength. Mostly I used to share with my workmate Mwende and sometimes Violet. And now that Gideon was there, sometimes I got close to him and I used to talk to him much. So as much as I used to talk to Gideon much, I had brushed off what he was saying to me, that I was his rib. But as much as I was brushing it off, it kept recurring in my mind. So I said, God, what is this? So one day, I was supposed to go to church. And even this Sunday, just going to church, getting away from home to church, it was just like a struggle. You will wake up very early in the morning saying that today by 8 I will go to church. But you find yourself, you have gone even around 11. So I used to wonder why God is all this happening. Why God is all this happening? I had a lot of questions in my mind. So one day I was almost I was just almost giving up to go to church. But something just told me just go. Even if it's late, just go. So this day I went to church, Emmanuel Jesus Power Ministry. The service was on. And when this service was on, during the time of worship, something happened. During that moment when I was in prayer, I remember I was shaken. I was really shaken, and I was really shaken. And all I remember, I fell down. But when I regained my memory back, I was right on the altar with Pastor Alex and Priscilla really praying for me, rebuking demons out of me. Especially they were uttering the idol's name. So that day, after that, I went back to sit. I was with dust, but at least I felt like something was just off from me. And I remember after that prayer, Pastor Priscilla returning on the pulpit, she said this statement, that the last will be the first and the first will be the last. I always remember this statement she made. So the service continued. I went back home and I told Nick everything that happened. Nick just kept quiet. Many times I wished to go with Nick to church, but every Sunday he will just wake up and leave. He will wake up and leave. Although he knew Pastor Alex and Priscilla, even sometimes I was just asking him to just visit them at their home, but he never did that. So we continued living with Nick, but the struggles were back. And another thing is like just Nick, slowly by slowly, he was going back to the habit that he had before. The arrogance, the rudeness. Sometimes I will get from work late, even 9, because I remember there's a day that I had to get from work 10:30 p.m. because I had a customer who came at 7, and Nesta at that time was just 1 month old. And that day I had done nothing, so there was no money. So I was thinking, if I leave this piece of work and at home I'm just the only one being looked at. And also another thing, Lillian, she never wanted any customer to go back home without being attended to, even if she had arrived at 9 p.m. She will usually negotiate so that she be attended to. So sometimes I will go back home late. Sometimes I just find peace with Nick, but sometimes he will start speaking the bad, like if I'm doing everything intentionally. Another thing, sometimes again I will be going to work, he accompanies me, he gets into the tuk-tuk, I have to pay the money for him. Sometimes he begs for lunch money and I don't have. So sometimes I will come home in the evening, quarrels start. He complains of how he has gone to town, he has nothing, he has eaten nothing, and I'm not supporting him. And you know, he's talking that way, and yet here I am in town having 2 kids. And sometimes I've reported and I have done nothing. I have gained nothing. Better him, he is alone, he can survive, he is a grown-up. But here I am with kids, they have to eat something. So the war again started. And this time I had sworn to myself that I will just deal with everything alone through prayer. So this period again, I was just being reminded of the dream that I had while I was at Nick's place. The dream that told me that this homestead, no. It's like I was just gaining more strength to face everything in me. Like the light of the Lord was fully shining into me. And remember, this is the same year, 2019, that I had my first dream, whereby we were gathered in an old ancient building. And suddenly the walls of this building were started breaking. And I, together with others, moved outside for safety. Again, while we were outside, suddenly the ground was split into 2 by an earthquake. And there was a huge valley in between. No one could cross. So we were those on the right side and on the left side. On the left side, I was with my sister Lynette, second born sister Lynette. So in an instant, those who were left inside the old ancient building, which had broken, an instant explosion of fire erupted. And us who were on the right side, we watched them burn to ashes. And then us on the right side, we were exalted. So this is the same year 2019 when I had this dream. And I remember I mentioned it to Pastor Priscilla, but she never gave me an answer at that time. So when things started on like that, one day I decided to just talk to my friend Violet, a colleague, workmate in the salon. Violet was older than me. So I talked to her and I mentioned to her what happened to me during church, and she was shocked. And then she said, "There's something that I've wanted to tell you for a very, very long time, but I used to fear much. How can I start telling you? Where do I start? I never knew how to start telling you about it." And I told her, "Just tell me, just tell, even if it's bad, just tell me." So Violet, my colleague, spoke and said, she has a pastor. The pastor is in Kakamega. He has a church in Matende. So Violet always goes for prayers there. And she said this pastor has visions. So early that year, 2020, early that year, 2018. So this was late. Not early that year, 2020. Because when she told me this was in 2020, late. So she was saying that early 2020, she had gone for prayers. And this pastor asked him, saying that the place that you work, I am having the vision of that place. And I am seeing a lady who has 2 children. And she loves sitting at the corner. And she said to Violet, "I want you to bring that lady to me, because she is trapped in a homestead that has no life. Even her own parents are against her marriage. That marriage is dead. It has no life, and he will take her nowhere. Even if she decides to remain in that marriage for many years, she will never prosper. She is in stagnation, because there is no life in that marriage. There is no life in that homestead. It is a complicated homestead." And the pastor more described and said to her where the family lives. It is on the way of Kakamega Road, on the way to Mumias. So when Violet told me about all these things, everything that this pastor said was true. Even the description of the path to Nick's homestead, it was true. So Violet said to me, "I know and I knew all along that you have been married to a very bad homestead. You are under slavery. But many times I have wanted to tell you so that I may take you for prayers, but I never knew where to start. So I told Violet that you will one day take me there." So I continued praying more. Mostly I used to read the Bible much than prayer. Now, Sometimes I will start praying, but I will find myself asleep and then wake up later to pray. So I had many fights surrounding me. Another thing, the plot that we used to live. This plot, it was Victor's plot. They were orphans. So the children were the one managing that plot. But the plot, it looked like if it was just dead, but we used to live there. We had Victor, Eric, and there's another brother. But this brother behaved like a madman in the streets. He used to wake up in the morning, go beg in town, and then in the evening he will return and sleep at their house, which belonged to their parents. There we had Eric too. So they had divided the number of houses so that if Victor receives rent for 4 houses, Eric receives for 4 houses, the other one is for that one who was mad, because he remained under the care of Victor. So I was in the hands of Eric, and this Eric was full of dramas. So the plot that we used to live, it had no life. It completely had no life. But we had to live there because we had no other option. And what I saw in that plot, there were some other weird happenings. I remember there was a night that I slept, and in a vision I was seeing the door of the house that I was living. The upper part of the doorpost to the roof, it was just full of caterpillars. That was the vision that I saw in a dream. Again, there was another day I just woke up in the morning. The door was open. The grass outside is green, but I don't know where this caterpillar came from. It was a big brown caterpillar. It made me have goosebumps, but Nick was able to crush it and threw it away. Another weird thing about this homestead, mostly at night, during around 9 p.m., we used to hear something climb at the aerial post, climbing upwards, and it made a lot of noise. It made a lot of noise. It will climb through that aerial post and then land on the roof of the building. And when it lands on the roof of the building, it will just start stepping. And when it steps with a lot of force and power. You may think that it was an elephant stepping on the roof. Then another thing about that land, there were rats living and moving. Huge rats that even they were breaking floors. They were eating, they were digging into the house from the floor. So I used to note this rat that usually entered my house, and it had 2 places, one in the bedroom and another spot in the sitting room. So around the shoe rack there, this rat will just enter my house and just pee. So it had 2 specific places, the shoe rack place and in the sitting room, one of the corners. I used to find the pee of this rat. So I was just wondering, what kind of rat is this that always just comes to my house to pee and then go away? So I started inquiring from the neighbors who had stayed long in that place, especially Mama Saimo, because I knew Mama Saimo was a woman who loved God and prayerful. Mama Saimo opened up and said to me that the thing that always walks on the roof, it has been there for many years. But if you strongly pray and rebuke it, you will never hear it stepping on the roof that is above you, your house. You may hear it coming, but when it reaches a point that belongs to your house, you'll never hear those steps. Again, she said to me that there was a rat that used to torment her in that house. This rat was very, very big, and he had his son, firstborn son. So his son used to see that rat, and he said, I will kill this rat. I will make sure that I will kill this rat. So one day his son targeted and set a trap for that rat. His son managed to knock that rat, but it never died. Instead, that rat hit back and it bit his son on the foot. So that's when Mama Simon knew that these are not just rats. But he prayed for his son and nothing happened to that leg. Another event that happened, she said that one day she was sleeping at night and she could see clearly a rat entering the chimney of her kitchen. It descended down into the kitchen and into the corridor. But when it reached the corridor, this rat changed and she could see it was the figure of a man. Though he could not see the face, but he saw that the waist was wrapped with a bathing towel. So these rats were not just rats, but demonic spirits in form of rats. Another event happened. The neighbor next door had just vacated that house and it was just empty. But one day as I went to sleep, we heard the unbelievable happening in that house. Remember, it is unoccupied, but we could hear as if commotions of people fighting. And they were in a very big fight that we could hear even utensils being knocked down, making the noises. The cutlery being knocked down, making the cups being knocked down, making the noises. So I remember even Nick heard this and she said, this plot, there is something that is fishy. We could hear these noises. But remember, that house is empty. It has no one. They were really fighting. There used to be another neighbor who came after us but didn't stay for long. He used to operate a motorbike business. So one day we heard his children speak and say that it was at night around 9 p.m. They were coming from the market. And right there at the roof where that house belonged to the late parents, they saw an animal that was standing at the rooftop. This animal appeared to be like a cat, but it was not a cat, like a wild animal. And as much as they stared at it, it kept on staring at them. So they got terrified and they went into the house to call their parents. But when they came out to see that animal, it was nowhere to be seen. So slavery is wide. Some people too are under slavery because they have settled, they have bought, they have built their houses on lands that were dedicated to dark altars. They are being tormented by demons. They are being tormented by evil spirits. Some lands, even sacrifices were made. You enter into a house, you have not prayed for that house or in that house. You do not inquire of the Lord to tell you if that is the right house you are settling in. So you enter into a house, it is new to you, but that house was already made a dark altar. Maybe someone was killed inside. You don't know the history of that place. It is always advised that whenever you buy a land, whenever you open a new business somewhere, whenever you shift to a new house, whenever you want to build, first you have to dedicate that place to the Lord and inquire of the Lord, so that you don't end up settling in places that is full of torment. Because many of the rich people outside here, they have acquired their wealth through the dark world. And you find it is a chain of torment. Some children also, they are pure. They are not of the dark world, but because they have inherited wealth from their parents, and this wealth, they don't know how their parents acquired this wealth. Some had to kill, some had to make sacrifices. Some are managed and controlled by demonic spirits. But now that the children had to inherit that wealth, they end up in torment. They end up under dark covenants. So the dark covenants is very, very much wide. Furthermore, there was a neighbor, Mama Glo. She was the one who used to wash my clothes. One time I was plaiting her, and she said to me that in her house, her husband used to come and give her some money. So she will just sleep and put the money somewhere. But in the morning when she wakes up, that amount of cash is not there. He asked her husband. Her husband said he is not the one. Or sometimes it happened to the husband. He stores his money somewhere, but when he wakes up, the money is not there. So he asks his wife, but the wife says she's not the one. Even the children, they are not the one. So they used to wonder, where does this money go to? Who takes this money? So one day she told her husband, today just come with your money, and just don't tell me you have a certain amount. Just go and store your money somewhere, and don't tell me where you have stored that amount of cash. So the husband did so. But still in the morning, there was no money. So they were surprised, they were shocked, wondering who took that amount of cash. Mama Glow also used to pray. She used to pray. So one day, remember we are in the same plot. So one day, during her night, sleeping, she could hear some commotion, as if something was meddling with papers. Something was meddling with papers. So what she decided to do in an instant, she just light up the torch, and there at the doorpost where her handbag used to hang, having the documents of her children, he saw a rat, and this rat was trying to pull out the birth certificate of her daughter. So that she got her answer. These were not just rats. These were demonic spirits. So back at Lillian's salon, it was like a war. And this hate grew, especially towards me. This hate grew. Sometimes it was just like she was forcing herself just to talk to me. Like she wanted me out of that place. But she could not get me out of that place because I was handling the business of my sister. And they used to share the amount of rent. Sometimes he will just complain that I have not handed her the right cash, that the day has had many customers. I will give her the summary of the cash of the work that had been done on that day, minus the commissions of people. Sometimes he will just burst saying, this money is not all, it is not enough, like I had stolen some amount of cash. You know, with her, the moment she saw that many customers had arrived in her business, that day she knew that she has made a lot of money. But what she forgets, she doesn't know that, let me say an example. You can have 20 customers in your business, and they have come buying only things amounting to 100 each. That is only 2,000 shillings. And then you can have only 4 customers that have come to your business. Only 4 customers. And they have ended up buying